Hello guys, welcome to the RE lesson. In today's RE lesson, we'll be looking at the topic known as temptation. Alright, it is very important guys that we look at temptation because we all know what temptation is and we all go through temptation even as we exist on this planet Earth. So without further ado, let's go straight into the lesson by looking at what temptation is. Alright, so be looking at what temptation is, what testing is, and what sin is. So let's start with what is temptation. So temptation is the attempt to make someone disobey God. So temptation is an attempt to make someone disobey God. Alright, so God has put the laws and rules that someone must follow, and then any attempt that we can do that tries to make us act in contrary to the laws of God, that becomes temptation. Okay, so we are saying everyone faces temptation. So everyone on earth faces temptation. No person is immune to temptation. Everyone faces temptation. So it only becomes a sin when one gives in to it. So temptation can become sin when one gives in to it. So you and I, despite living on earth, despite all being faced with temptation, we do not sin. We only sin when we give in to it. So temptation is an attempt to make someone disobey God. Okay, so we must understand that to be tempted is to face the attraction of sin and be in danger of being drawn into it. So that is it. So when one is tempted, it means they are being attracted to sin and be in danger of drowning into sin. So when you and I are being tempted, it means we are attracted to sin and being drawn into sin, as found in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verses 12. Alright, so we must understand very clearly that to be tempted is to face the attraction of sin and be drawn in danger of being drawn into it. So temptation forces us to decide for or against God. That's what temptation does to us. It makes us to decide for or against God. For instance, Satan uses temptation to try to separate us from God, as with Adam and Eve. Okay, so we can read this from Genesis chapter 3 verses 1 to 19, where Satan, who is the serpent, or through the serpent, tempted actually Adam and Eve so that they get separated from God. And this actually happened. Eve and Adam got separated from God. So temptation forces us to decide for or against God, and then Satan uses temptation to try to separate us from God. All right, so let's proceed. So here we also must understand that God never tempts anyone. God never tempts anyone, as we read from James chapter 1 verses 13. God does not tempt anyone, but Satan is the tempter who tries to take advantage of our desires, as found in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verses 5 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 verses 5, and also James chapter 1 verses 14. So Satan is the tempter who tries to take advantage of our desire. So temptation can come from Satan's voice or from our natural desires. So that one also we must know. This temptation we are talking about can come from Satan's voice, where Satan can whisper to us, or it can come from our natural desires. So when these desires are fulfilled, inappropriately, they become sin. So we know we have desires for sexual immorality, desire for substance abuse. So when we fulfill these desires inappropriately, then that temptation to fulfill these desires inappropriately, when it is fulfilled, then it becomes sin. All right, so it's very important that we take note of these. So we now move into testing. What is testing? We are saying testing is a situation where God tries our faith and obedience. Okay, so testing is a situation where God now is trying to test our faith or tries our faith and our obedience. God uses a situation to see whether we have faith in Him or whether we can obey Him. All right, so it helps build Christian character. So testing helps build Christian character as found in James chapter 1 verses 2 to 3. Okay, so we are saying there is a difference between temptation and testing. We must know that there exists a difference between temptation and the testing. So when God is involved, it is a time of testing. So when we are facing through a difficult situation and in that situation God is involved, then that does not become temptation, but it becomes testing. Examples from the Bible include Abraham. So we see Abraham, he tested by God to offer his son Isaac. Okay, we all know this story where God asked Abraham to offer his only son Isaac. So he obeyed and God stopped him from sacrificing Isaac. So whenever God is actually testing us, He does not allow the situation to go ahead and happen. The situation will happen, but before it goes into complete happening, then God comes in and stops it. So as in the case of Abraham, Abraham did not sacrifice his son by killing him because God came in and stopped him from sacrificing Isaac. So we read this from Genesis chapter 22 verses 1 to 13. Also, another person who was tempted is Job. So Job lost everything with God's permission but remained faithful. Okay, Job was another. He lost his animals, his wealth, his children, and actually the wife tempted him to curse God so that he will be killed by God, but Job refused to do that. All right, so Job resisted temptation. And when we read from Job chapter 1 verses 6 and then chapter 2 verses 10, we are able also to understand the story very fully. So Job got tested and lost everything with God's permission but remained faithful, and later on we read that all what he lost got restored back to him. All right, so let's proceed. So we now look at what sin is. So what is sin? We are saying sin means breaking the relationship between man and God, often leading to broken relationships among people. It is failing to meet God's standards. So that is sin. So in simpler terms, it is just the breaking of relationship between man and God. That is what sin is. When this happens, it leads to broken relationships among people. So sin leads to broken relationships among people. So because of sin, people cannot agree very well, cannot exist very well, cannot love one another, cannot do good things for one another because of sin, leading to broken relationships. So sin, it is failing to meet God's standard. So where we fail to meet God's standard means that we are sinning. So sin begins with inner thoughts and is expressed outwardly. So sin always starts with our thoughts. And then when we have those thoughts, usually they can now result into an action. So when that happens, then it results into sinning. So an example is King David's adultery with Bathsheba, as we read from 2 Samuel chapter 11 verses 1 to 5, where David, when he was on top of his roof of his house, he saw a beautiful woman naked bathing, and then because of the thoughts that came in his mind, that made him to go after her, and community actually sin by having sexual relationship with her. So we are saying sin begins with the inner thoughts and is expressed outwardly. An example is King David's adultery with Bathsheba in 2 Samuel chapter 11 verses 1 to 5. All right. So we also read here that methods of temptation and examples of people who were tempted in the Bible. So we are looking at methods of temptation and examples of people who were tempted in the Bible. So we are saying temptations come in various ways. So this temptation we are talking about, it comes in various ways. One way is through our desires. Okay, so we have desires as human beings. So our own desires can become methods through which temptation can come to us. For instance, we are saying sexual and other physical or emotional desires can cause us to get tempted, as we read from 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verses 5 and James chapter 1 verses 13. Example is Eve and Jesus, who were tempted with food. Okay, so this can be read in Genesis chapter 3 verse 6 and also Matthew chapter 4 verses 3 to 4. So we must understand very well that the desire for immediate pleasure can lead one into sexual pleasure or substance abuse. So these desires that we have can lead us into sexual pleasure or substance abuse. All right. So another way through which temptation comes to us is our weaknesses. Satan exploits or uses our physical or emotional weaknesses. For example, Jesus during his betrayal, as we find in Mark chapter 14 verses 38. Okay, this could be a situation where Jesus was about to be crucified, where he almost prayed that God makes this cup to pass away from him, but then later on said, the will of God be done. Okay, so our weaknesses, Satan can use our physical or emotional weaknesses to get us tempted. So we are saying, for instance, someone who is overwhelmed by work, or someone who is overwhelmed by stress at work might be tempted to cheat, okay, or cut corners to manage their workload. So someone, you are overwhelmed or you are weak, you slept late, then the following morning you have to go for work. Because of the weaknesses that you have in the body, Satan can tempt you to say, no, you are sick, you are not supposed to go for work, so you end up cheating. All right, so temptation comes to us through our weaknesses. So Satan uses our physical or emotional weaknesses to tempt us, like in the case of Jesus during his betrayal. All right, so we have to also understand that temptation also comes through our pride of position. So temptation can come through our pride of position. So the example given is King Nebuchadnezzar's pride, which led to his punishment, as we read from Daniel chapter 4 verses 30 to 37. And also King Herod Antipas was punished for accepting worship, as we read in Acts chapter 12 verses 21 to 23. So it's very important that we understand that the pride of position is very dangerous, because it is one of the ways through which temptation can come to us. So because of this, we are saying people can manipulate others. Okay, pride of position can cause people to manipulate others for sexual favor, promotions, or taking undue credit for others' work to maintain one's status or power. So it is very, very important we understand that positions as well can lead us into temptation, or can become a way of temptation, because one can now use positions to manipulate others for sexual favor, promotions, and also take undue credit for others' work and one's status or power. All right, so other ways through which temptation can come to us is actually poverty and prosperity. So here we are saying poverty can lead to stealing, prosperity can lead to pride, as can be read from Proverbs chapter 30 verses 8 to 9. So we are saying financial hardship might tempt someone to steal or engage in fraudulent activities to survive. Okay, on the other hand, someone who is very wealthy might be tempted to become arrogant or rely wholly on their wealth and neglect their spiritual and moral responsibilities. So you see, these two positions, which is poverty and prosperity at the same time, can also lead someone into temptation, as we have seen that poverty can cause someone to do what? To steal or engage in fraudulent activities to survive, while also prosperity can actually cause someone to be tempted to become arrogant, rely solely on their wealth, and neglect their spiritual and moral responsibility. Okay, so another way through which temptation can come to us is through friends. Okay, through friends. So friends can mislead us, as can be read in Matthew chapter 16 verses 22 to 23, where we are told that bad company ruins good morals. So we need to understand very well that a group of friends who regularly goes out drinking and engage in risky behaviors actually can cause one who wants to avoid those temptations to be pressured or misled by the bad influence of their peers. All right, so this is very dangerous. Okay, so another way through temptation can come through or to us is helping others. Okay, here we are saying we should be careful not to fall into the same temptations when helping others. So we are saying, for example, a person trying to help a friend overcome an addiction might themselves be tempted to try the substance, especially if they spend a lot of time in environments where the substance is present. So in such a situation, we can get tempted. Okay, so other ways through which temptation can come through or to us is circumstances. So we are saying avoid situations or places where temptation is likely. Jesus taught pray to avoid temptation, as we read in Luke chapter 22 verses 40. So we are saying here, for example, attending a party where there is known to be illegal activities can place an individual in a position of temptation, which is why it is advised to avoid such environments. All right, so let us look at examples of people who were tempted in the Bible. So one example of such people who were tempted is David. So here David committed adultery after seeing Bathsheba bathing, as we read in Samuel chapter 2 or 2 Samuel chapter 11. And also other people were tempted are Daniel's three friends, which is Meshach, Abednego, were the friends of Daniel who were tempted, but luckily refused to worship king's idol, as we read in Daniel chapter 3 verses 4 to 18. Then other people who were tempted actually is the Apostle Paul. So we read Apostle Paul denying Jesus out of fear, as we read from Luke chapter 22 verses 45 to 62. Okay, so guys, we have come to the end of this RE lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. For those interested in online lessons for RE, you can contact me on the number 0977 92 41 75, 0977 92 41 75. As for now, guys, bye and see you in the next lesson.